everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Be the Wolf. And the question of the day is: are you wasting your life?
Yes.
Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I'm here today with Christina Ruska. She is a soul purpose coach, and she is up to some big things in the world and creating some stuff that's just about ready to open. So, we are going to dig into this question of: are you wasting your life? We're going to talk about being the wolf and following all the things. And so, soul purpose coach. That is what she is. And I bet a lot of you out there are going like, what is a soul purpose coach? I'm a career transition coach, but that kind of makes sense to people. But what is a soul purpose coach, Christina?
So, a soul purpose coach to me is teaching people to or guiding people to uncover the superpowers they already have. So, we're born with talents, and because we live in the society that we live in, um, those talents are sometimes quickly categorized as good or bad or useless or whatever they are that society tells us, but we have them for a purpose. Our purpose is already decided, in my view, already decided sort of when we get here, right? So we are so, um, I guess, trained to be what everybody wants us to be, to be acceptable societally, and to get a good job, make money, work really hard, all of those things that we're taught that means success. And when we are focused on all of this external validation, we are allowing what is internal and so very important to atrophy almost. We choose to sort of push those things to the side. We call them hobbies or interests or whatever, but we're not really digging into them and connecting with them in a way that is going to allow us to show up in the world the way we are meant to show up in the world.
Okay. So does this play into sort of, people talk about like, what is your purpose? What's your purpose in life? Does
Mhm.
this really play into figuring out what your purpose is?
Yes, it does. Because and so I'm a dual certified Dharma and spiritual life coach. And so the Dharma aspect, Dharma has like 16 different definitions or whatever, but really it is your purpose. It boils down to your purpose. And so it's about really going inward and figuring out, what are my unique gifts and talents? What are my superpowers that I may or may not be utilizing? Once I connect with those and find those, now I know what I'm here to do. Now I know how I'm supposed to show up, and how I'm meant to interact and create and co-create with the universe, this life that I'm here to live.
Awesome. So, in some ways, you and I do similar things.
Mhm.
I help people move into fulfilling careers that they love, and you help people figure out a big piece of like really what feeds their soul and spirit for doing what they love.
Mhm.
And I definitely dive into finding purpose with people. And I know from
Mhm.
my own journey of figuring out what my purpose was
Mhm.
was
Yeah.
was a little topsy turvy. I remember coming back from a shamanic healing, and they asked, what is your purpose, somewhere in there, and I was like, to uncover that which is unseen. Which, ironically, well, the funny thing is, I do so much work with the unconscious mind that,
Yes.
well, that makes sense. But
Mhm.
I've narrowed down and categorized my purpose as to embody and assist expansion in the
I love
world.
that. Mhm.
And yeah, and so I'd have the way I do that in my business, I have the way I do that in my everyday life. So I'm guessing with all this, you know what your purpose is now.
Yes, my purpose, and it actually, I was in I was at a yoga retreat in Tulum in Mexico in the fall of last year, and I had, all of the shamanic stuff. There's a lot of, we did um, a lot of just Mayan healing rituals and things like that. And it just came to me on the beach. Like I just felt this inner knowing that you're here to work with women. You're here to support women and helping them find their purpose. That's your purpose. That's why you're here.
Mm.
And I was in the mortgage industry at the time. And so I was in my head, like I start of immediately thinking about it. I'm an overthinker. And I was like, okay, how am I going to
Wait,
make this
wait,
work?
wait. Let's not go there quite yet.
Oh, okay.
I want to no,
Yeah.
because this is such a juicy piece.
Okay.
And where we end up, I know a lot of people are struggling to figure out what it is they're supposed to do in life, what it
Mhm.
is that will fulfill them, what it is that will make them happy. And, you said earlier, you were talking about going through those ideas, those societal expectations of what you're
Mhm.
supposed to be doing. And I know everyone's like, oh, the shoulds, the
Yes.
shoulds. I
Yes.
should go to college. I should get a good job, make a bunch
Right.
of money,
Yeah. Like
have
that's
the
what I feel like
whatever.
that's what
Yeah.
we're taught from birth, especially like in the United States. It's like it's it's shifted some because of things like the pandemic and, generational changes and things like that, but it's still sort of this path that's laid out for you. Like, you really need to do really well in school. You need to get really good grades so that you can get into a really good college. Then once you get into that college, you need to study really hard so you can get good grades so you can graduate with a degree. And immediately after getting that degree, you need to go find a really, really lucrative job somewhere. And now people kind of job hop a little bit, but in the past it was like, and once you've landed that job, like that's it. You're good,
Right.
bucko. Like for the rest of your life, you're just going to do this job, get your gold watch after 40 years or whatever, and then, you know, retire. But now we're working longer hours and we're working longer years. Like people are working well into their 70s now. And so it's like, at what point do you get to actually explore and enjoy your life and do other things that you are here in Earth school to experience, you know?
Right. Well, and a big piece of it too, the retirement age was 65, but people didn't live much longer than that.
Mhm.
And so people are working a lot longer because they don't have the retirement funds to fund another 20 to 30 years of their life.
Mhm.
And so keep working, keep working, keep working. And a big piece of living your purpose, and a big piece of, I think, where people are leaning is about, how do I enjoy my life now? How do I feel good every day? And those boundaries that people lived in, following that, go get a good education, get a good job, do all of the things, and follow that path that was laid out for you, that kind of path was born, I think, out of the Great Depression and out
Mhm.
of this fear and the scarcity mindset of, we need to have security. I
Mhm.
need to have security because that is what's going to make everything okay. And
Mhm.
once you're secure and stable, then you could potentially live. But the problem is the secure and stable in that like pattern doesn't really ever happen, because it's the secure and stable is when you have enough saved for retirement that you will finally feel safe and secure. But
Mhm.
what is enough? What
Right.
is enough?
Mhm. Yeah, and I do feel like too, during the Industrial Revolution, like we had I feel like our entire education system is a crock. I mean, I'm just gonna be honest. I think that it was born of, the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and all of these people that needed factory workers, and so then it was like, "Okay, the moms are at home, how can we get them into the factories? Oh, we can create this school system where we take care of these kids during the day and educate them, and it's like a win-win for everybody, right?" But really, it was just conditioning these kids to be factory workers. You have a bell in the morning and that's when you come in and learn. And then you have a bell at lunch and that's when you eat. And then you have a bell in the afternoon and you go out for 5 minutes to breathe air. And then you come back in and you work more. And it's just like conditioning everyone to go into this factory setting. And we as a society have, and the gap has gotten wider and wider, but like we are being farmed for our output, and that's depressing, and so and so you can just decide on your own, like, no, like my output is for me and it's for me to share with people that I choose to share it with. And that's, I think that, and another, and not, this isn't like, I'm not the first person to say this by any means, but like, I really feel like the pandemic was a huge turning point with regard to people's sort of view on this, because I think that once they were able to stop for long enough to recognize, because they didn't stop, you never stop in this country, like you just go go go. And so when people were sitting at home and like, oh my gosh, like what am I going to do with all this time now that I don't have this 3-hour commute, or I don't have all these meetings every day, or whatever it is, and then they started, that's, I feel like what started to awaken people to all these, latent talents that they have, where they're like, oh yeah, I do that on the weekend, or I do that on the side. It started to enable them because they had more time, and they were focused more on doing things that they wanted to do because they had the time to do it, that they were like, wait, why don't I just do this more often? Like, why do I only do this every third weekend, when I have time to squeeze it in? Like, why am I not doing this a lot more? And then once they started doing those things a lot more, utilizing their talents a lot more, then because we're Americans, it's like, then they figured out like, oh, maybe I could monetize this. Like maybe I could have it all. Like maybe I could do what I really am passionate about doing and also make a living out of doing that. So,
Well, I think one of the things that really happened during that pandemic time, yes, I think a lot of people started leaning into doing some stuff that they like. But I think personally, what really happened for a lot of people is that all of a sudden all your coping mechanisms are gone. You can't go to that show, you can't go out to dinner, you can't go to the bar, you can't go hang out with your friends. So all of these things that we used to mitigate the pain in our life were gone. So now you literally have to sit in it. So now that you have to sit in it, in the beginning, I remember it was like all those things that you said you would do if you had the time. Well, now you have the time. And most people were not doing those things. They were just sitting and freaking out about the fact that all the stuff that they used to cope with their daily life wasn't there. And so over time, when you have to sit in the stress of the life you've created without those coping mechanisms, then it starts to open up and be like, whoa, what do I really want to do? If I'm using all these things as distractions to just get through, that's not the way I want to live. So I think it's this big opening. And so when you were in the mortgage business.
I was in the mortgage business. So I stayed busy.
Yeah.
I stayed busy through the pandemic. I was working, I mean, it was a huge boom in the industry. I was working probably from 6:30 in the morning until 8, 9, 10 at night. I actually set up a little makeshift desk in my bedroom, as unhealthy as that sounds now, because I was like, oh, this is gonna help me be even more productive. Like I just literally roll out of the bed, grab a cup of coffee, and I'm just like, working. So yeah, I didn't experience the lull that happened during the pandemic, but I know so many people who did. Meanwhile,
Right.
I was working, just ridiculous hours, 7 days a week. I mean, we all were. Everybody who was in the mortgage industry at that time in 2020 and 2021 was just grinding daily, just grinding.
And so I think, so many people know that grind.
Mhm.
Now, some people during the pandemic, like yourself, and many people before the pandemic, now that you're away from that particular grind,
Mhm.
what do you say fueled the grind? What was the things for you, the stories you told yourself about why you had to work so hard and push so hard? What were those stories that you told yourself?
So I have always been driven. I I want I w like, I don't know, if and we don't need to get into this whole thing, but, I follow human design, and I'm a projector, so I, um, you know, am conditioned by a bunch of generators, 70% of the population. I was raised by a generator and a manifesting generator, and what was always drilled into me and shown me by example, as a young child was, "You work. You're here to work." I had a stellar work ethic, as did my parents. Like, that was the example that was set, and it was just like, do do better than the best you can do. Like, always bring your A game. And so I just got into this pattern of, like, striving and achieving and, like, wanting to be the best at whatever it was that I was gonna do. If I was gonna if I was gonna be in mortgage, I was gonna be like, I wanted to be a household name in mortgage in my market. I wanted to be the go-to person that people were like, "Oh, you need a mortgage? You call Christina." And so I just it was all consuming. And the way that the industry is structured, um, that is like the leadership. I I I I was a perfect fit for what I was doing because I was coachable. I took notes. I wanted to do more. I read. I Everything that I could think of to do to be the best mortgage originator that I could be, I did. And so,
Let,
yeah.
let me ask you this.
Mhm.
What would it have meant if you weren't the best?
I would be a failure. And I felt like a failure a lot of the time, even though I had all this outward success. I constantly was it was I was a huge comparison person, so I would always look at other people's numbers and what they were doing on social media, the meetings that they were having, the, events that they were hosting, and just like, "I should do that, I should do that, I should be doing more, I should be taking more applications." And I mean, we even had, like, um this thing within our company that was like, just one more. You can do one more. You can do
Right.
one more application, one more pre-qualification, all of that sales stuff. But yeah, like I felt like if I weren't constantly striving and getting better every day at what I did and getting more, that I was failing. So
Let
it
me
was a very black and white situation.
let me can I dig a little deeper just for the
Yeah,
sake that I think
absolutely.
so many people really know what this is like, right? More. I have to do better. This person is doing so great. I have to be at least that good. And, this cycle, it's like a hamster wheel that just runs freaking crazy.
Mhm,
So, what if, like, go back to your mindset back then? What if you didn't? What if you didn't? What would that mean beyond Failure. What if you failed? What did that mean about you? What
mhm.
did that mean about the world? What did that mean about, yeah.
Yeah, so I internalize things, and so it wouldn't be that I had failed or that this career had failed or wasn't a good fit. It would have meant I was a failure. Like, I was a failure. That's how my mindset was then. It wasn't about any sort of, um, external anything with regard to how I felt. It was all about, like, I am what I do. That was the biggest thing in my role. It's like, I am what I do, and I spent an entire career trying to, like, I mean, building building that life, building a lifestyle around that. I am what I do. I mean, I had a license plate that said I lend on my Mercedes,
Mm,
you know? I mean, I just I what I recognized after I started kind of waking up was that, like, I built a cage for myself and boxed myself in and made it so difficult, and I think a lot of us do this. Like, I made it so hard to walk away because I created this life that I sort of, I guessed I wanted. I mean, I was, I'm making six figures. I have a really nice car. I have a nice lifestyle. I wear nice clothes. I have jewelry. Like, I had all these things. Like, I had this stuff,
right.
and that was to show people, like, I'm not a failure because look at me. I'm
Mm,
succeeding. But it wasn't for me. Like, it wasn't bringing me joy. It was bringing me frustration and stress and anxiety. And so then I would, my coping mechanisms were, and there were several over the years, but probably the biggest one right prior to leaving the business was like um more things. Like, I had become this like shopaholic monster that was like, like, I work really hard, I make all this money, so I should get to enjoy it. And so I would just buy stuff, stupid stuff.
mm,
I mean, when I decided to leave my career and decided to sit down and, I mean, out of necessity, sat down and figured out like my financial situations, I had subscriptions that were like $99 a month, $119 a month, just billing. And I didn't even use them. I didn't even know what they were for. I didn't even remember signing up for them, you know?
right.
And it also, um, for the worse, changed my concept of money because I was like, I had so much of it for so long that it was like $1,000 really meant nothing to me. It was $1,000. It was like,
Hmm.
now I'm trying to get back to, like, I actually was paid to do a speaking engagement, and it was I was paid the tiniest, smallest fraction of what I am used to making, and that's my favorite paycheck I've ever gotten in my entire life. Like, I
Right.
actually cried, just considering it, like, this I cr I delivered this and made this. This is my baby, and I made it, and I put it out into the world, and I was compensated for that, and, like, that felt so amazing as opposed to, let me just keep churning out, mortgages and being paid a lot of
So,
money to do it.
yeah. And so, what I want to, and I don't know if this is your story particularly, but in what I'm hearing is something that's so common for so many people. And of course, this may or may not be you, but this place where I don't want to be a failure. I have to do all of these things. I have to have all of these things. I have to make this money. I lend. This is who I am in this rabbit like hamster wheel of I keep doing and doing and spending and spending. I don't really have a whole lot of abundance because I keep spending it, and it's proving that I can spend this money because it's proving that I'm not a failure.
Mhm,
And so it almost sounds a little like your purpose at the time was to not be a failure.
mhm,
And when you did that speaking gig, and this I think is so important for those of you looking for career fulfillment out there, is what I sort of hear in that is that you got paid to do something you love, that's from the heart, that's expansive and purposeful, and
mhm.
not about proving your worth.
Exactly. I identify with that 100%. Yes.
So, when I think a lot of people have gotten into their careers and they're doing all the things that they're supposed to because they're trying to prove their worth.
Mhm,
And when you don't think you're worthy, or when you think that you're not enough deep down, most people will do a million things to prove their worth, whether they have a million physical tangible items, whether they work so hard that they burn themselves out and get sick. I think you know
Mm-hmm.
about that one.
I do.
um when you get to this place where you know your value and you know your worth, then everything starts to change.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to trust and know that you can do something you love that feeds you joy and get compensated.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's it's it seems so simple. It is so simple, but it's not what we're taught. So we don't we our it's like our minds don't even go there because it's not part of the paradigm that we're taught from a tiny young age that, like these are the steps. You do the steps, you know.
Right. Well, and you do the steps is really about teaching people that this is how you get that thing that you're supposed to have, instead of teaching people to look within themselves and figure out what's true and right for them. Because
Mhm.
your self-worth diminishes when you're bending into stuff that's not right for you. Your
Mhm.
self-esteem is ultimately your opinion of yourself, and your unconscious mind, your conscious mind knows everything you've ever done. And
Mhm.
so when you go to work trying to prove your worth, trying to prove that you're not a failure, you're doing that because deep down inside you think that you are a failure. You wouldn't be doing it otherwise. But
Right.
when you come to that place of knowing like you're valuable just as you are,
Yeah.
and you bring value to the table and you have worth, and you get to start stepping into those things that mean something to you, that have meaning, then you start to build your self-esteem. You start to build your opinion of yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I mean, I cried constantly at work, like all the time. And I that doesn't happen now, fortunately. But it's like you said, I was trying to like put myself, bend myself into what a mortgage originator is, like what I was supposed to be, and judging my output and really taking personally things that I viewed as failures on my part. And um yeah, like it was a miserable existence. But I think in some ways you get it sucks you in. You almost get addicted to like, okay, well, but I'm going to do this. Like I'm going to be really good at this. And that becomes your sole focus. You're not even thinking about your self-worth or any of that. I mean, it's
Right.
damaging you. It's hurting you. I mean, I can honestly say like my job hurt. It hurt me deeply on a daily basis. But I mean, I was committed. This was what I was. I was a mortgage lender. Like I didn't even know who else I would be without that sort of label.
Right.
There are 100 other labels on top of that one. I'm a wife, I'm a friend, I'm a sister, all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. That the identities, the labels that we put on ourselves. I'm a good girl,
Mhm.
right? It's like, what do you
Yep.
mean? I used to tell people all the time, oh, I'm sweet and innocent. And people would look at me like I was crazy, because back
Yeah.
in those days I was, well, some people would say wild. But my identity of who I was a good girl. I didn't do anything bad. What are you talking about? I would never. But
Yeah.
in ways I was gaslighting myself, right?
Oh,
Maybe
yeah,
I'm a
for sure.
mortgage lender. I'd like, this is who I am. This is
Yeah.
everything of who I am. And
Yeah.
thinking if I'm just the best, then somehow I'll be happy.
Right. And like that's the thing. Like I used to tell people I'm a workhorse. Like
Hmm.
why would I almost inviting them, like, use me, expect me to be accessible to you 100% of the time. Expect that you can, um, step over any boundaries that I create, which I didn't really create any, but expect that from me. Like, I'm giving you permission. I'm giving you permission to treat me like I'm some sort of commodity. Um, you
Hmm.
know, I would sort of like intuit, like from people, like what are they looking for? And I'm going to be that for them.
Mm-hmm. So you were sitting there, you got the download that your purpose was to help women find their purpose.
Yes. And initially, that's what I was going to say whenever we were at that part. That's illegal in mortgage. Like you can't be like, well, I'm going to still stay in mortgage, but I'm only going to work with women. Like, you can't discriminate in mortgage. And so that was sort of the first little, because I was so like mortgage focused on all things. That was the first thing after getting the download that I questioned. Not like, oh my gosh, like, are you ready to like blow up your entire life and just like rise like a phoenix from the ashes? No, it was like, well, how can I make that be RESPA compliant that I can that I'm just going to work with women? And of course, you can't. So,
Mm-hmm.
but like really once I had that idea, it was just like all consuming. And then I say it was like this divine thing, which I mean it was, but it also was helped by the fact that Facebook spies on every do. But I was sitting in the airport in the Centurion Lounge on our way back from Tulum and just scrolling, and this ad for Dharma Coaching Institute popped up. And I was like, oh, that's it. Like, that's what I could, that's how, I can make this transition. And so I signed up for it like on the spot. And I think, while yes, I'm sure my phone was spying on me while I was having all these amazing conversations with all these Mayan healers in Tulum, in Tulum, it's that was a huge like it was a life raft. It's like
Right.
the universe threw me a life raft and was like, you're overthinking it because you have a tendency to do that. So like just do this, because I was still very much in that space of like needing to have steps and needing to have things ordered in a certain way.
Well, and that's the thing is sometimes it just takes one step. And it doesn't even matter if the thing that showed up on the Facebook ad or the this or the that doesn't even matter if it's the right step. The fact that
Right.
you take a step
Mm-hmm.
towards that thing that you want, that purpose. One of the things that's really important about having a purpose, y'all, is the brain to be happy needs a problem to solve. And if the problem is solvable, you will run out of motivation. If your purpose is based on your family only, and then once your kids, if your purpose is to raise kids and have them be great, then you're so desperate for grandkids because you need to like continue that cycle. You get depressed when the birds leave the nest. But when you have a purpose that's bigger than you, bigger than your family, and impossible to complete, then there's always motivation to keep going. And it's also keys about it too. It's something that can be done anywhere. I can create expansion and embody expansion anywhere and everywhere. All I have to do is just be joyful and I do it. So you have to be able to do it anywhere and you have to be able to have it be unsolvable. I think I don't know. I can't. I'm like, I was about to name some famous people's purpose, and all of a sudden they just got super crisscrossed. I'm like, I'm going to get it backwards. So, like, oh, Richard Branson's is to learn and have fun, I think, something to that effect. And those
Yeah.
incorporate his values. But there's always more fun to be had, and there's always more to learn. No matter what, that purpose will never be finished. So, it's something to keep you motivated and moving forward always in life. Okay, so you signed up and then you got back to mortgage lending, and then what happened?
I started so that was in November of last year. So I started to sort of go inward, I guess. Like I knew that I wasn't living my purpose. I knew that this wasn't my purpose. And I also I had that inkling of what you talked about, like, well, I'm intrinsically worthy just by the fact that I'm here. Like, I don't
Yeah.
have to prove myself. And so, um, I still was working, obviously, like, I still, because I had this, like, I had a 5-year plan. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna transition slowly and quietly out of this industry into what I really wanna do." And the more, like, the there just became this, like, dichotomy that I could not bridge the gap for. Like, I started to really resent doing anything that wasn't, um, about creating this space where I could help other women wake up, like, help other women recognize, like, "Girl, you are a queen, like, you are amazing, and you have all these gifts and talents, and you're wasting your life on this, you know, hamster wheel, like, wake up." And so, I just I I realized probably 3, 4 months after I got back from Tulum that, like, I this is not sustainable. Like, I cannot continue to give my effort and energy to this role, and I was still, and we haven't talked about this part yet, but I was still suffering, um, some side effects from a breast cancer diagnosis that I'd gotten a few years earlier, and so I was burning out. And I could
Yeah.
feel it. It's like as soon as that internal fire to prove myself burned out, there was nothing left to keep me going where that job was concerned, you know? And so, um, yeah, like, I started to figure out, like, I was really super honest with myself, and I said, I can't do this anymore. I don't wanna do this anymore. I'm hurting myself. I'm making myself sick. I'm staying sick because I keep doing this, and so I've just got to figure out a way out,
Yeah.
and so, yeah.
And the brain is a really beautiful thing. You don't always have to know how you're going to do it. Sometimes, if you just know that you're going to do it, the pathways will show up. You've got to be willing to take the leap.
Mhm.
And, sometimes it's like, oh, you take the leap, you quit the job, and then you're like, oh no, what am I going to do? And you scramble and you take some crappy job again and you start the hamster wheel all over again.
Mhm.
But if you're paying attention, you know that you've got to do something different than you were doing before. Whatever it is, you've got to do something different, right? That definition of insanity. You can't keep
Mhm.
doing the same thing or you're going to create the same problems. So sometimes that will show up as, an ad for a coaching program or a particular coach or a certain healer. Maybe you'll be having a conversation with somebody and they'll say something that will just pop your mind open into something new, but stepping into doing something different. So I love that you also recognize that the hamster wheel was making you sick and keeping you
Mhm.
sick. And the
Yes.
body is when you get sick, especially with something like cancer, your body's trying to tell you something. It's
Mhm.
not just, we have cancer cells that we beat in our body constantly every day. Our body is continuously fighting off cells that are abnormal, that could turn into cancer cells, all of those things. But when we are stressing ourselves out so much, that the environment becomes ripe for those cells
Mhm.
to grow into something that can potentially kill us if we are not paying attention. So,
Mhm.
taking care of your health is incredibly important. So, you decided to just leap. You leaped. We're
I
getting
did.
towards the end. So, you leaped, and then you're like, oh God, what am I going to do? And you started working on a project called the Love Shack. Tell me
I
about that.
did. So, I bought a house in May of last year, and we moved, and it's literally a quarter of a mile. Like, it's around the corner down the street from the house that we've lived in since 2000. So, um, and that house was never supposed to be our, like, it was a 2-year kinda thing, and we just never left. And, So we moved around the corner and down the street, and this house just sat. And at one point, I asked my husband, because he bought this house before we were married, so it's his. And I just was like, Hey, what are you going to do with that house?" And he's like, "I don't know. I guess I could sell it. I don't really want to though. And I don't want to put renters in there because I don't want anything to happen to it. Why? Why are you asking?" And I was like, I want to turn it into a center for women's empowerment. And I fully expected him to be like, "You have lost your mind." Absolutely not. But he said, "Oh yeah, no, that's cool. You can do that." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, like this is amazing." And so we've slowly been renovating um this house to turn it into that. Like there's a podcasting studio in here now, like that's where I am now. And there's a little yoga studio. There's a space for like meeting. It's got all these big beautiful like the huge square meditation cushions. So
Yeah.
everybody can just like sit around in a circle. Um, it opens into the kitchen, so there could be like Ayurvedic cooking demonstrations and things like that. And then there's another room that I haven't done anything with, but it can potentially be used for like body work and Reiki and massage and all of that stuff. So, yeah, it's like a dream come true, and it's almost ready. We're almost ready to like unveil it. But, just the fact that he was so on board, uncharacteristically so, I was like, "Thanks, universe."
Well, here's the thing. Do you have a pattern of in the past of not asking for what you want? I think a lot of people, a lot of
Mhm.
women especially, don't ask for what
Yeah,
they want. So I would say the moral of the story right here in this is ask for what you want.
absolutely. And, he too had a similar, not I wouldn't call his like an awakening or anything, but he decided that he was really going to do what he wanted to do, which was, he rehabs and sells like houses that are in need of repair. He's always been passionate about that since I met him 26 years ago. And he just never did it because it's like not, it's not part of the plan or whatever. And so he just, about 5, 6 years ago, he was like, "You know what? I'm going to do this." And I, unfortunately, to my utter dismay and regret now, I was like, "That's a terrible idea. Like, that's not what you do. Like, how that's not stable. It's not, you don't know enough about it. Like, you should just stay doing what you're doing. Like, you make a good living. Like, you should just do what you're
Right.
doing." And so he was like, "Yeah, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna leap." And so he leapt, and he is realizing the success of that. So I think that when I said to him, "I want to open a center for women's empowerment," I think because of his journey and because he saw how lit up I was doing the work that I've been doing with, working with women, he immediately was like, "Yeah, that's a yes." And so it's just so beautiful how it's shaped our relationship too. And I think healed a lot of our relationship by
Yeah,
by being supportive
absolutely.
of each other's, passions and purposes.
And one thing before you tell us all about how to get in touch with you and all the things you have to offer. One thing I see in that little piece of your story is he modeled for you that it doesn't matter what even the closest person to me
Mhm.
thinks, that I can still step forward and do what's right for me. That is such a be the wolf quality. And one of the big reasons we're in that hamster wheel is because we're modeling what has happened before us. And
Mhm.
culturally and generations before, because there was so much fear about stability, that people have not modeled how to live a life that's true and right for you. And
Mhm.
that's a big piece of why I do this podcast, is because I want people to know that it can be done. Even if you didn't see it growing up, or you didn't grow up around it, or all your friends think you're crazy, there are lots of people that are doing it. And it's
Mhm.
important to show up in the world in that way so we can light the path for everybody else.
Amen,
All right,
sister.
Chris. All right, Christina, tell us how people can work with you, where they can find you, the deets about the Love Shack. If you're watching this video, It's not quite open yet, but by the time you hear this podcast, it will be open. So tell us
Yeah.
all the goods.
Okay, so my website is ChristinaRuska.com. So first name, last name.com. That is actually still under construction too. And I feel like everything at this point is, but I'm approaching this so differently than I ever have in anything in my life. And so instead of holding everything in until it's absolutely perfect, I'm just kind of like flinging it out there, and I'm just going to like grow as I go. So
Love it.
ChristinaRuska.com. And I'm also on Facebook. Um, Christina Ruska SPC, which stands for Soul Purpose Coach. And you can also find me on Instagram at I am Christina Ruska. Oh, and you can email me too, Christina@ChristinaRuska.com.
And for those of you that are like, how do you spell Ruska? It's Rusca, not a K, but a C.
Yes.
Okay. Christina, thank you so much for sharing your journey, your story. I can't wait to find out about all the great things you're doing at the Love Shack. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. I really am excited to be here, and I love our talk. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, everybody. We will see you next time on Be the Wolf.